Hi, everybody. Welcome. Shalom, everybody. Welcome from Boulder. It's nice to see you all, those who are going to watch live and those who are going to watch later. It's snowing pretty badly over here. I don't know if you can see the background in the Chabad house. So I'm actually going to introduce somebody else every day, either me or Leah or Esty, who's working for us, who some of you know, some of you don't. We'll get to know. We'll be teaching you, or not teaching you, but sharing with you something nice, something positive. I know you're all stuck at home to be able to live with at least till next time. So obviously tomorrow Shabbat we will not be doing one, but we'll try and continue every single day consistently, exactly the same time, 2 p.m. In Colorado. And with that, I'm going to introduce Esty to come and share a little bit of positivity bias.
Hi, thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Esty, as has just been stated. We're going to get right into it. We've called this positivity bias, and that is what we're going to be working on developing. But first, we kind of need to understand what a bias is and where positivity comes into that. So we're going to start by taking a walk, a virtual walk, since we're all kind of stuck inside now. So come walk with me. We're going on the boardwalk, and we have just met an individual, and we're having a fascinating conversation with them. And within this conversation, this person we've just met, they claim that they are presenting an opinion that is completely objective. No subjectivity here, no biases. They're presenting a completely objective opinion. You buying it? Are we into this? Is it like, can this individual, can I as an individual be completely objective? And the answer is that no. To be an individual and to be objective are actually, by definition, contradictory. As individuals, we, through nature and nurture, free will, we form perceptions of reality. We form these lenses, and they shape our experiences of reality, how we experience ourselves, how we experience others, how we experience reality in general. So objectivity and individualism is really contradictory. So we have biases, fact. Often we connote the word biases with like kind of negative, like for sure negative actually, but it doesn't have to be negative. It's actually natural. Biases are just perceptions of reality that we have developed based on our experiences, perhaps our personality. They're not a negative. They can be a negative, but how we can ensure that our biases affect our lives in a positive way and not in a negative, and these lenses that we form to view our reality are not negative, is by being super conscious. So we consciously create biases. How I see the world, I choose how I see the world. It's not so easy, obviously. Any conscious living is not as simple as it sounds, but it's really important, because once we've understood this premise that how I see reality is how I'll experience reality, then I really need to be super careful of how I see my reality. I want to be conscious of that. So we're going to be concentrating on one bias, because we have a lot of lenses that we see the world through, but we want to concentrate on one that will really help us during the times we're in now, and that is the positivity bias. So you can come to the conclusion of what the positivity bias is that I look at the world and I see things in a positive way rather than in a negative way. Not that every experience I encounter is positive, but that my view on it, my perception will be positive. Kind of vague, but we're going to try. What we're going to do throughout every day except tomorrow, obviously, it's Shabbat. We're going to kind of look at different tips, tools, techniques of how to develop our own positivity bias. So we're going to move into what today's bias is, what today's life positivity bias hack is. how are we going to be consciously positive? How are we going to consciously affect the way we see the world today? So bear with me. We've moved on from our walk. We are now going to do an experiment. This is an experiment that was performed in 1993 by a Nobel laureate, a Nobel Prize winning professor. His name is Daniel Kahneman. He actually wrote a really fantastic book. I think it's called Thinking Fast and Slow, New York Times bestseller. He's a psychologist who won his prize for economics. But this experiment that he did was like this. Now, we all have some extra time these days, so if you want to do this experiment at home, you can. You might have to be your own control group, but you can give it a shot. He took people and he exposed them to water, freezing cold, very cold water of 14 degrees and 15. So two different groups. One was exposed to 14 degrees water, put their hands in for 60 seconds. And the second group was exposed to water, hands in, 14 degrees, 60 seconds, but then they had an additional 30 seconds of being exposed to 15-degree water. And the results of this experiment were that the people who were exposed to the 1 degree warmer water for that extra 30 seconds had a more of a positive recollection of their experience. It was less painful for them. So let's look at this logically. You have 60 seconds of 14-degree water versus your 60 seconds plus an extra 30 of 15-degree water. So they both had their hands in very cold water for an extent for this period of time. But the second group that recollected their experience with less pain, really, they were exposed to the cold water for a longer period of time. I mean, 14 to 15 degrees is not exactly a huge difference, but it was slightly warmer to them, and that made the difference. Even though they were exposed to very cold water for a longer period of time than the first group, they recollected it more positively. And this is what we call the peak end experience. So simply put, what is the peak end? Is that it's called the peak end rule. It's that a person is most likely to remember an event or an experience as positive or negative based on its ending. So what's an example? You've just taken a test, and the beginning of the test, you went into it very nervous, and you discovered that you didn't know the information at the beginning of the test, and you were struggling. And then at the end of the test, you came across this essay, a couple of multiple choice questions, and you're like, hey, I've got this. I know this information. And you wrote that essay and you felt really confident in it. And that was the positive experience. Now, when you look back on that test, you're more likely to be like, it was okay. That essay at the end really that kind of leveled it out. I think that was an okay test. Now, if it happens the other way, according to the peak end rule, you can have that great essay in the beginning, the multiple choice questions in the beginning, and you're great, but the information at the end of the test, you're like, I don't know what's going on. And you will remember that test as the worst test ever because the end was hard. So peak end rule is that we remember an event or experience as positive or negative based on its ending. Interesting. Good rule to know, but fact is we don't control how things end necessarily. Or can we? We can control how some things end. So what we're going to take our life hack for today is that one of the ways to experience this, develop this more positive lens on life is to always try to consciously end things on a positive note. That's a great hack. So let's talk about where we encounter this in Torah, and then we can discuss where in our lives we can utilize this. So the power of the end, this end peak end rule, we see in Torah quite a few times. So one example is in Talmud, where Talmud is talking about dreams. it instructs that when a person has a bad dream, they should wake up from that dream, and instead of their dream ending when they wake up, they kind of draw it out and they tell it to someone else. And they let the other person say this was a good dream or interpret it for the good. So that their dream didn't end when they woke up and they just had this rubbish dream, but they've pulled the dream out and they've allowed the ending to become a positive. So that's just one place in Talmud where we talk about how have you can create a positive ending for something to affect your lens on it in a positive way. Another place in Talmud is where we talk about how Talmud suggests that a person ends a conversation. So it says ideally we should end a conversation not talking about frivolous or meaningless um, conversation, but we should end with talking about something spiritual or a communal affair, something with more meaning. This is, I mean, it's super practical. We'll get into it in a second. I'll show you one more place where we experience this is, or where we see it in Torah is there is a book called the Book of Lamentations. Okay, so Lamentations, the Book of Lamentations. We're obviously not talking about something super happy. The whole book is pretty heavy. It's talking about the destruction of the temple and the Jewish exile. And the book ends, let me find the line that it ends with. It ends with, "For if you have utterly rejected us, you have already acted exceedingly harsh against us." That's the last line of the Book of Lamentations. Kind of gives you a taste for the whole thing. Obviously, negative experiences. I mean, we're the Jewish nation, we've had a couple. But the technique we've used in our survival and in developing a positive experience of life is this, what Rashi, a commentator, says that we do at the end of reading the Book of Lamentations. There's a custom that Rashi refers to is that we repeat the second to last line of the Book of Lamentations, which is, "Return us to you, Lord, that we may be restored, renew our days as of old." So we say this really dreary line at the end and we back up quickly. We say a more positive line so that the end of it, we end on a positive note, because that is how we develop a positive bias to life, where we're always trying to end on a positive note, to really develop that lens where you see things in a positive way. Um, there are scientific studies about how people who are happier in their older age or are more self-assured have this positive bias. So it's definitely something that we want to develop, and it's a way to live consciously and positively. So all good. So right now, I mean, our social interactions are kind of limited. I heard something really nice. We're calling it social distancing, but perhaps we can just call it physical distancing, because it's not a time to really be socially distancing ourselves. We're still interacting with each other. We're so blessed to have a platform like this where we get to still interact, whether it is virtually. Um, but so many of our conversations right now are not exactly the most positive, which is understandable. There are people who are really in pain and are suffering, and everyone should be blessed with health. And this should come to a joyous conclusion soon. But within our interactions now, our social interactions with others, they often determine, or they at least punctuate our experience or memory of a given day. So a single conversation can make or break our mood. So when we're interacting with people, and if our conversations are a little low right now, we can still be super conscious to at least finish them. When we're closing our conversations, think of something positive to add. End on a positive note. That's really what we're working on right now. So just in conclusion, um, the positivity bias is actually, there's a book called The Positivity Bias. It's available on Chabad.org. The whole thing, every chapter has another positivity hack, and it's what we'll be using to discuss every day. We'll send out a link so you can take a look at it. And it really it utilizes, it kind of follows the lifetime of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Nachum Mendel Schneerson, and kind of the Rebbe lived through a lifetime of two world wars. He had no children. a pandemic or two. He didn't have an easy life, but he definitely really worked hard on developing this positivity bias. So the book follows the Rebbe's life and kind of watches his techniques, how he developed this positivity bias. And one example it brings when talking about ending on a positive note is that whenever the Lubavitcher Rebbe and his congregation would get together to farbring, to talk, they would end with a joyous song. The words of the song were, "You shall go out with joy and go forth with peace," which is a great way to end any interaction. So from this today, we're taking out, we're just reminding ourselves to end every experience and interaction on a positive note. And God willing, we should all be able to go forth with joy and in peace. You can post next to the video your comments or questions whenever you see this. And let us know if you have any other positivity hacks that you want to discuss or any ideas, or just say hi. Reach out. We'd love to hear from you all. And have a beautiful Shabbat. We will see you on Sunday, 2 o'clock.